The first call came from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Klein, this is Horizon Bank. We need to confirm your signature on a mortgage application." I laughed. "I don't have a mortgage." There was a pause on the other end. "You're listed as co-borrower." That's how I found out my parents had used my name to buy a house, without telling me, without asking, without thinking I'd ever find out. If you've ever trusted someone so completely you never thought to check the paperwork, stay with me. And if this hits close to home, tell me where you're listening from. My name is Rachel Klein. I'm 31, and I have always been the reliable one. That was my role growing up. My parents ran a small landscaping business, unpredictable income, seasonal dips, always a little behind on something. I was the organized child, the one who filed tax returns for them at 22, the one who set up their online banking, the one who explained interest rates over dinner like it was casual conversation. "You're so good with numbers," my mom would say, pride warming her voice. It felt good to be needed. I didn't realize that being needed could blur into being used. 2 months ago, I applied for pre-approval to buy my own condo. It was supposed to be exciting, fresh start, something mine. Instead, the loan officer frowned at his screen. "You're already carrying a significant mortgage obligation," he said. My stomach dropped. "I'm not." He turned the monitor slightly. There it was. A mortgage filed 8 months ago. Primary borrower, Thomas Klein. Co-borrower, Rachel Klein. The address wasn't mine. It was my parents' new house, the one they'd told everyone they'd finally saved enough to buy. I remember how proud they looked at the housewarming. My dad clapped me on the back. "See? Hard work pays off." I had believed him. Now I was staring at a digital record that said I signed that mortgage too. "I never signed this," I told the loan officer. He looked uncomfortable. "Then you need to contact the issuing bank immediately." I drove to my parents' house that evening. Not furious, just confused. Mom answered the door, smiling like always. "Rachel, you should have called." I stepped inside slowly. "Did you put my name on your mortgage?" Her smile flickered. "Why would you ask that?" "Because it's there." Dad came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "What's this about?" "You used my signature." Silence. Not shocked silence. Guilty silence. Dad sighed. "We didn't think it would matter." My chest tightened. "Not matter?" "It just strengthened the application," he said quickly. "The bank wanted more income history. You have excellent credit." "I never signed this," I told him. My Sundays watered. "We did what we had to do." That sentence echoed. We did what we had to do. A childhood memory surfaced without warning. I was 12. Dad couldn't make payroll 1 month. I offered him the money I'd saved from babysitting. He took it, promised to pay me back. He never did. I didn't ask, because family sacrifices for each other. That's what I was taught. But this wasn't babysitting money. This was my legal identity. "You committed fraud," I said. Dad's expression hardened. "Don't talk to us like we're criminals." "I'm talking about what happened." "You're overreacting," Mom whispered. There it was, the quiet humiliation, the suggestion that my concern was excessive. "You put my name on a legal contract without consent. That's not overreacting." Dad crossed his arms. "If you report this, you'll ruin us." The sentence hung heavy between us. Ruin us. As if I were the threat, as if their action wasn't the cause. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, clarity. Because this wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. They printed documents, signed my name, submitted them, and hoped I'd never notice. The loan officer's voice echoed in my head. "Contact the issuing bank immediately." If I ignored it, I would be complicit. If I reported it, I might destroy my parents. I stood in their new living room, the house bought with my credit, my name, my future, and I realized something quietly devastating. They didn't see what they did as betrayal, they saw it as borrowing. But you can't borrow someone's identity, not without consequence. I didn't report them that night. That's the part no one talks about. The hesitation, the way loyalty tangles itself around logic. I drove home and sat in my car for 20 minutes before going inside. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my thoughts weren't. If I called the bank's fraud department, this would become real, formal, documented. If I didn't, I would carry a mortgage I never agreed to. I opened my laptop and pulled my credit report again. The loan amount stared back at me. $348,000, 30-year term, 8 months of on-time payments. Technically, everything looked clean, except the signature. The next morning, Horizon Bank's fraud team called again. "Miss Klein, we need verbal confirmation. Did you authorize this mortgage?" The question was simple. Yes or no? My throat tightened. "No," I said. There was a pause. "Understood. We'll open a formal investigation. Please do not contact the primary borrower until our review is complete." Too late. But I didn't say that. I just closed my eyes and let the word investigation settle. That evening, my dad called. "They reached out to us," he said without greeting. His tone wasn't panicked, it was irritated. "You reported it." I confirmed I didn't sign. "You could have handled this privately." Privately how? "We would have added you officially, refinanced later, something." Something. That vague promise of future correction. "You forged a legal document," I said evenly. "We didn't forge," he snapped. "We signed for you." That's the definition. Mom's voice floated faintly in the background. "Tell her we were going to fix it." Dad lowered his voice. "We were going to fix it." "When?" Silence. "You don't understand the pressure we were under," he said finally. "Then explain it." The landscaping business had slowed. A supplier contract fell through. Their lease was ending. They needed stability. So they used mine. "You always land on your feet," Dad said. "You're strong." That's the dangerous compliment. You're strong. Translation, you'll absorb this. I thought back to college when I co-signed a small equipment loan for them. They paid that one off eventually. I had trusted them because they were my parents. Trust without boundaries becomes leverage. 2 days later, the bank's fraud investigator called again. "Miss Klein, we've reviewed the original application. The signature does not match your previous documentation on file." I exhaled slowly. "Next steps? We will require a sworn affidavit from you stating you did not authorize the loan. After that, we may involve legal authorities." Legal authorities. I imagined police at my parents' door, neighbors watching, my mom crying. The humiliation would be public, and it would trace back to me. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying childhood moments. Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Mom sitting beside my bed when I had the flu. They weren't villains. They weren't monsters. They were flawed, desperate, and wrong. The next morning, I drove to the bank's local branch to speak to the fraud team in person. The investigator, a woman in her 40s with calm eyes, met me in a glass-walled office. "I need to be clear," she said gently. "If you proceed, this could become a criminal case." "I know. Are you prepared for that?" That question felt heavier than the mortgage. Prepared? No. But informed? Yes. "I didn't sign it. I can't carry it." She nodded slowly. Identity misuse, even within families, is still fraud. Hearing it stated so plainly made something inside me steady. It wasn't betrayal to name what happened. It was accuracy. "Do they have a history of financial strain?" "Yes." "Have you previously co-signed for them?" Yes, that context matters. She slid an affidavit across the table. This protects you, she said quietly. I stared at the blank line where my signature would go. Irony. They had signed my name without permission. Now I had to sign to reclaim it. My phone buzzed. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Another buzz. Dad. I silenced it. When I picked up the pen, my hand didn't shake, because something had shifted in me. For years, I had equated protecting them with protecting family, but protecting them had cost me clarity, cost me credit, cost me the ability to buy my own home. The investigator watched quietly as I signed. Rachel Klein. My handwriting. My consent. Thank you, she said softly. We'll handle the rest. As I walked out of the bank, the air felt sharp, cold, clean. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my parents would forgive me, or if I would forgive them. But I knew one thing. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to carry the consequences of their choices. The phone rang again. This time, I answered. Rachel, Dad said tightly, what have you done? I took a slow breath. I told the truth. Silence. Then, quietly, you've just destroyed us. And for the first time, I didn't immediately accept that as my burden. I didn't answer him right away. You've just destroyed us. The sentence hung between us like smoke. I didn't forge anything, I said quietly. You did. Dad exhaled sharply. You think the bank cares about nuance? They're going to call the police. I told them the truth. Your truth, he snapped. There it was again, as if facts were subjective. Mom took the phone. Rachel, honey, please, we can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't involve copying my signature. We thought you'd be okay with it. You didn't ask. We knew you'd say no. That honesty stunned me. So you knew it was wrong. Silence. Then Mom whispered, we were scared. Fear. It keeps showing up in these moments, like it's an explanation. But fear doesn't erase consent. The fraud team moved quickly. Within a week, the mortgage was flagged as disputed. My name was temporarily removed from liability pending investigation. My credit score rebounded almost immediately. Seeing that number climb felt like watching something fragile repair itself. But my phone didn't stop buzzing. Aunt Lydia left a voicemail. You're putting your parents in danger over paperwork. Paperwork. That word minimized everything. It's family, she added, as if that settled it. Family. I used to think family meant automatic forgiveness. Now I was realizing family also means accountability. 3 days later, the bank requested a formal interview with my parents. The fraud investigator called me beforehand. They may claim verbal authorization, she said. We'll compare timelines. I never authorized it. I know. That reassurance mattered, because when enough people imply you're overreacting, you start wondering if you are. I thought about when I was 17 and got my first job. Dad asked to use my credit card to cover a supplier bill just for a week. It became 3 months. He paid it back eventually, but the balance lingered long enough to affect my credit utilization. I didn't complain, because helping felt like love. Somewhere along the way, helping turned into expectation, and expectation turned into entitlement. The interview happened on a Friday. I wasn't there, but the investigator called afterward. They admitted signing your name, she said calmly. Admitted. My chest tightened. They said they believed you would have agreed. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed. It's not. Will there be charges? It depends on whether the bank chooses to pursue criminal action or resolve it civilly. I closed my eyes. Civil sounded better than criminal, but neither sounded good. That evening, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. Mom's eyes were red. Dad looked smaller somehow. "You couldn't just talk to us?" he asked. I did. "You escalated." I clarified. Mom stepped forward. "They're saying we committed fraud." "You did." The word felt heavy. Dad's jaw clenched. "We didn't do this to hurt you." "I know." "Then why couldn't you protect us?" That question cut deeper than anything else. Protect us, as if my role was still the organized daughter who absorbed the fallout. "I'm not your shield," I said softly. Mom started crying. "We're your parents." "Yes, and parents sacrifice for their children." "Not like this," I replied. There was a long silence. Dad finally spoke. "We were going to refinance once business picked up." "With what income?" I asked gently. He didn't answer, because the truth was simple. They needed my credit, not my consent. "I wanted to buy my own place," I said quietly. "You knew that." Mom wiped her eyes. "You'll get there." "Not if my name is tied to your debt." Dad shook his head. "You're choosing money over family." There it was again. The reversal. The suggestion that protecting myself was greed. The same tactic, different setting. "I'm choosing legality and boundaries." The word boundaries felt new in my mouth, almost foreign. Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "Who are you?" she whispered. I felt that question deep, because for years I was the accommodating one, the fixer, the quiet absorber. But maybe this version of me had always been there, just buried under obligation. "I'm still your daughter," I said gently. "I just won't sign things I didn't agree to." Dad looked toward the door. "If they press charges—" "I didn't ask for that," I said quickly. "I asked for my name back." The truth is, I didn't want them arrested. I didn't want headlines. I wanted correction, clarity, and something else I hadn't realized until now: respect. They left without another word. The apartment felt too quiet after they were gone. I sat at my kitchen table and let myself cry. Not because I doubted my decision, but because standing up to your parents feels like tearing a seam in reality. You're raised to believe they know better, that their choices are justified, that questioning them is betrayal. But adulthood teaches something harder. Parents can be wrong, and love doesn't erase consequences. The fraud team said they would likely pursue civil restitution instead of criminal charges if my parents cooperated. That gave me some relief, but the damage wasn't just legal, it was relational. They had signed my name because they assumed ownership of it, and now I had reclaimed it. I didn't know what that would cost us, but I knew this: if I backed down now, I would never fully own my future. The bank chose civil resolution. That's what the investigator told me over the phone 3 days later. They have agreed to refinance solely under their names within 90 days, she said. Your liability will be fully removed once that's complete. 90 days. 3 months suspended between correction and consequence. Will there be a criminal record? I asked quietly. Not if they comply. Relief came in small waves. Not joy, not victory, just less fear. The next step required their cooperation. They would need to provide updated financial statements, reapply under stricter underwriting, possibly accept a higher interest rate. The cost of desperation is rarely free. Dad called that evening. "They're making us refinance at a worse rate," he said. "That's standard after fraud investigation," I replied. "You're talking like a banker. I'm talking like someone who reads contracts." Silence. Then a softer tone. "They won't approve us without collateral." I waited. "You'll have to co-sign again," he said finally. The audacity almost took my breath away. "No, we raised you, and I'm grateful. But that doesn't grant you legal access to my identity." Mom got on the phone. "We'll lose the house." There it was again, the weight placed gently at my feet. Lose the house, as if I were holding the eviction notice. "I didn't buy the house," I said carefully. "You did. With your help. Without my consent." Mom's voice cracked. "You're punishing us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself." That distinction mattered, but they weren't ready to hear it. Over the next few weeks, extended family began circling. Phone calls framed as concern. "You're being rigid," Uncle Martin said. "Rigid protects credit," I replied. "Family protects family. Family doesn't forge signatures." That usually ended the conversation, but the pressure lingered. At work, I found myself distracted. My condo pre-approval was reinstated once the mortgage dispute was formally flagged as fraud. Seeing that approval letter felt like breathing fresh air after months underwater. I could move forward, but forward meant leaving them to face consequences alone. One afternoon, Mom showed up at my office. Not dramatic, just tired. "She met with a financial advisor," she said quietly. "That's good. He said we overextended." "Yes, and that using your name was reckless." The word reckless hung gently between us. Not malicious, not evil, just reckless. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I know. I just wanted stability. And I want that too." She nodded slowly. "I don't think we ever learned how to ask without assuming." That sentence surprised me, because it wasn't defensive. It was reflective. "When you were little," she continued, "you always stepped in before we asked. You handled things. You made it easy." I swallowed. Being capable doesn't mean being available. She looked at me for a long moment. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I've clarified." We sat in silence in the small conference room. "I can't co-sign again," I said gently. She nodded. "I know." That was new. "I know." Not arguing, not deflecting, just accepting. "We may have to sell," she admitted. The word sell felt heavy. "That might be the responsible choice," I said. It wasn't said with cruelty, just realism. She sighed. "I wish we'd talk to you first." "So do I." Because this didn't have to become legal. It could have been a conversation, a request, a no, a boundary respected. Instead, it became a document forged, a bank involved, a trust fractured. 90 days passed slowly. They didn't secure refinancing. They listed the house. When it sold, they paid off the mortgage entirely. My name was officially cleared. I received written confirmation from Horizon Bank. No liability, no record, clean. I printed that letter and placed it in a folder, not out of paranoia, out of closure. Dad called once the sale closed. "We're moving into a smaller place," he said. "Okay." I should have asked. Yes. I didn't want to hear no. There it was, the truth stripped of pride. "I might have said no," I replied honestly. "I know."
We didn't solve everything in that call, but something shifted. They were no longer insisting I had ruined them. They were facing their own choice. And that mattered, because accountability feels different when it's owned, not assigned.
The letter from Horizon Bank arrived on a Monday. Your name has been fully removed from the disputed mortgage obligation. Your credit file reflects no liability. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to feel it, clean, restored, mine. For months, I had carried this invisible weight, not just the mortgage, but the accusation that I was heartless for protecting myself. Now the paperwork was final, and the silence felt different, not tense, just settled. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom townhouse across town, smaller, less impressive, more realistic. I visited once, 2 weeks after they unpacked. The place smelled like fresh paint and cautious optimism. Mom made coffee, Dad hovered near the window like he didn't know where to stand. No one mentioned the fraud. Not directly, but it was there, in the careful tone, in the way Dad asked before touching my laptop when I set it on the table, in the way Mom slid a utility bill toward him and said, "We'll go over this together." Together, not delegated, not assumed. I noticed the difference. "You didn't have to come," Dad said quietly. "I wanted to." That was true. Love doesn't disappear because boundaries appear. It just changes shape. We sat at their small kitchen table, not the big island in the house they lost, just a modest wooden surface with 3 mismatched chairs. And somehow it felt more honest. "I'm sorry," Dad said finally. Not defensive, not dramatic, just simple. "For signing your name." I nodded. "I know you didn't do it to hurt me." "But I did," he said. There was no argument in that sentence, no justification, just acknowledgement. And that mattered more than any court document. "You taught me to read contracts," I said quietly. "Remember?" He gave a small, embarrassed smile. Guess I should have followed my own advice. We all sat with that, not laughing, but not breaking either. There's something strange about seeing your parents as fallible adults. It's disorienting, because you grow up believing they operate on a higher plane of wisdom, and then one day you realize they are just people, imperfect, proud, afraid, trying to survive, sometimes badly. I didn't forgive them in one dramatic moment. Forgiveness isn't cinematic, it's incremental. It's watching behavior change. It's noticing that Dad now asks before assuming. It's hearing Mom say, "Can you look this over?" instead of "just handle it." It's boundaries respected without resentment. I did buy my condo, a small 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet building. The day I signed the closing papers, I held the pen carefully. I paused before writing my name. Rachel Klein. My handwriting. My consent, no one else's. When I moved in, I invited my parents over, not to prove anything, not to make a statement, just to share the space. Dad walked through the living room slowly. "You did this on your own," he said. Yes, and that yes felt powerful, not because I had defeated them, but because I had defended myself. There's a difference. The house they lost wasn't really about square footage. It was about pride, about stretching beyond means to maintain an image, about fear of shrinking. But shrinking isn't failure. Ignoring reality is. What happened between us wasn't just a financial mistake. It was a lesson in consent, in autonomy, in the quiet strength of saying no, even when it hurts, even when people call you ungrateful, even when they say you've destroyed them. Because protecting your name isn't betrayal. It's adulthood. My parents still struggle sometimes. Old habits don't disappear overnight. But something fundamental shifted.
They ask now, and I answer honestly. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, without guilt. If this story felt personal to you, tell me what boundary you had to set. Thank you for listening.